Members, good afternoon. It's the appointed time we have a quorum. I call to order the meeting of the panel on environmental affairs. Agenda item number 1, information papers issued since the last meeting, that is the 16th of December 2024. After the meeting, the Secretariat has issued 2 information papers. They have been listed on the agenda. Next, items for discussion at the next meeting. There are 2 items to be discussed on the 14th of February 2025, Monday at 2:30 p.m. The administration proposed to discuss 2 items: 1, producer responsibility scheme on plastic beverage containers and beverage cartons, and proposed amendments to Schedule 3 to the Mercury Control Ordinance Cap 640. Do members agree to the above arrangements? Thank you, members. Agenda item number 3, proposed amendments to Gas Safety Ordinance Cap 51 to regulate the safe use of hydrogen fuel. Let us first welcome the administration to join us. We have with us Mr. Che Chin-wan, Secretary for Environment and Ecology, and Mr. Chen Pak-chung, Deputy Director, Regulatory Services from the EMSD, Mr. Arthur Lee, Commissioner for Climate Change, Mr. Eric Wong, Assistant Director of the EMSD, and Mr. Ju Wa-wing, Acting Chief Engineer from the EMSD as well. I'd like to ask the Secretary to walk us through the papers. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Today we are going to consult members on 2 ordinances. In June 2024, we promulgated the Strategy of Hydrogen Development in Hong Kong. In the first half of 2025, we are going to introduce an amendment bill to the LegCo in 2025. That is to provide a legal basis for the regulation of the manufacture, storage, transport, supply, and use of hydrogen used as fuel. Together with other gases that are regulated under Cap 51, hydrogen is highly similar to these gases. So we propose to amend the said ordinance, and that is the Gas Safety Ordinance, to provide regulations. It can enhance public safety. At the same time, it can also foster an environment that is safe and legal for the trade, so that we will encourage our mainland counterparts and the overseas counterparts to make good use of hydrogen as fuel. So we'll help the country to go global in this area. We'll also leverage on the principle of one country, 2 systems, and we have the advantage of our motherland and connection with the world. I'll give the floor to my colleague to walk members through the amendments. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Hydrogen is currently categorized as a Class 2 dangerous goods and regulated under the Dangerous Goods Ordinance Cap 295, similar to other compressed gases. Potential safety risks associated with the use of hydrogen as fuel increase. There is no comprehensive legislation to regulate the use of hydrogen as fuel. The Gas Safety Ordinance Cap 51 has regulated local gas, including town gas, natural gas, and liquefied petroleum gas (LPG) since 1991. Hydrogen as fuel is highly similar to the 3 types of gas above. The amendments to the ordinance will regulate the hydrogen as fuel in a comprehensive manner. There are 2 parts to our amendment proposal. 1, expanding the regulatory framework under the ordinance to cover the use of hydrogen as fuel. That is provided under the Gas Safety Ordinance Cap 51. We are going to introduce amendments to this ordinance. At the same time, we will also be adding new subsidiary legislation to make regulations in relation to the safety of hydrogen as fuel. Regarding the amendments to the Cap 51 Gas Safety Ordinance, we will amend the definition of gas under the ordinance to include hydrogen as fuel with a view to bringing it under the regulatory framework. Hydrogen as fuel refers to any gas that is primarily hydrogen to be used or intended to be used as fuel for 1. The propulsion of a vehicle or train, or 2. The operation of machinery, and so on. We are also going to amend certain existing provisions in the ordinance for application to hydrogen as fuel and its related areas. Meanwhile, we will also amend the ordinance to empower the Chief Executive in Council to make regulations in relation to the safety of hydrogen as fuel. In relation to the proposed new subsidiary legislation, it will cover the entire supply chain of hydrogen as fuel. The new subsidiary legislation will be subject to negative vetting by the Legislative Council. Regarding the major areas to be covered, they include hydrogen quality, registration of hydrogen supply companies, construction and use of hydrogen installations, type approval of hydrogen containers, use of hydrogen systems, permit for hydrogen conveyance vehicles, as well as the registration for hydrogen vehicle mechanics. We will also introduce amendments to the related ordinances. Hydrogen not used as fuel continues to be regulated under the Dangerous Goods Ordinance, Cap 295. There will also be corresponding amendments to the ordinance in order to exempt hydrogen as fuel from its regulation. The purpose is to avoid double regulation. Between the 20th of February and the 19th of March 2024, we conducted a trade consultation session. There were a total of 230 survey responses collected from representatives of the hydrogen energy trade, vehicle maintenance trade, and various professional bodies. The consultation outcome indicates that the trade strongly supports the relevant legislative amendments for providing an appropriate legal framework and enhancing public confidence in hydrogen safety. A study on the proposed amendments' impact on the business environment indicated that the proposals would have a positive impact on the business environment. We have already commenced the law drafting process. We plan to introduce the amendment bill to the LegCo in the second quarter this year. That concludes my introduction. Thank you. I now open the floor for members to ask questions. The lineup is Mr. Gary Chen, Mr. Kenneth Lau, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, Ms. Chen Yut-ming, Ms. Elizabeth Kwat, Mr. Tong Li-tse, and Ms. Carmen Khan. 4 minutes each, questions and answers included. Mr. Gary Chen, please. Thank you, Chairman. If we need to develop hydrogen in Hong Kong, we do need a set of standards that is legal. Indeed, we need to introduce amendments to the ordinance, but I have a few questions. In the papers, the administration said that it would have to build a comprehensive and safe system for the development of hydrogen. Different countries around the world have different standards in relation to the application of hydrogen as fuel. Our country is the largest country in relation to using hydrogen as fuel. So do we need to align with the standard of our country? Otherwise, the supply of hydrogen and the application of hydrogen may not be in line with the development of the country. So I'd like the administration to confirm, for the storage, supply, transportation, and application of hydrogen, do we have the same standards as that on the mainland? We need to align with our country's standards. For future maintenance of hydrogen vehicles or hydrogen conveyance vehicles, it is critical that the mechanics have a registered qualification. There weren't significant accidents in relation to the transportation of hydrogen vehicles. There was one case in which an LPG taxi had a fatal accident. So we do need to attach importance to hydrogen vehicles. It takes more than a simple code of practice. It takes more than simple training. We do need serious regulation. Otherwise, the impact will be even more significant than that of the LPG taxi accident. I hope the administration will attach importance to this area. My next question is that for hydrogen storage containers, the Labor Department will have to give the green light. Do we need the approval from the EEB as well as the EMSD? Secretary. In relation to the details, I'll give the floor to my colleague in a moment. Regarding the standards, we do attach a lot of importance to aligning with the standards of our country. Last month, I met with the relevant administration, that is the general administration, to confirm the details in relation to aligning with the standards of our country. We need to help align the standards of our country with those of the world. So we're working on standard alignment. We attach a lot of importance to maintenance as well. So for hydrogen vehicle mechanics, we will work on it, and we attach a lot of importance to hydrogen vehicle mechanics. I'll give the floor to my colleague. Thank you. Just now, as I mentioned in the amendment bill, there will be a few subsidiary legislation, including the construction and use of hydrogen installations and the registration of hydrogen vehicle mechanics, which cover the repair of hydrogen vehicles as well as the regulation over hydrogen vehicle mechanics. All these will be brought under regulation. On a different note, in relation to hydrogen containers, they will be covered under the subsidiary legislation in the future. That is in relation to the types of hydrogen containers. So it will be covered under the Gas Safety Ordinance. Next, Mr. Kenneth Lau. Thank you, Chairman. There's climate change. We are after green energy. This is the global trend. I'm glad to see the administration is going to amend the Gas Safety Ordinance Cap 51 to provide a legal basis for the regulation of the manufacture, storage, transport, and supply of hydrogen used as fuel. I'd like to ask about the location of hydrogen station. It will be the first in Hong Kong, that is in Yuen Long Ngau Tau. In Kowloon and on Hong Kong Island, the government is going to build more stations. There will be integrated energy service stations all over Hong Kong. First of all, they have to be low density. They have to be 25 meters away from recreational facilities. They also need to be 50 meters away from schools and hospitals. In Hong Kong, there are lots of built-up areas in the urban area. So how can we strike a balance? Secretary.
Thank you. I'm sure we're all aware of the risk associated with hydrogen, and so in the choice of building the refilling stations, we have to be very careful. Now, for the risks, there are two aspects. First, the gas itself is flammable, and so we have to ensure that the location has good ventilation so gas dispersal can take place very quickly. And second, we talk about the storage of the gas, because it is the gas is prone to explosion, and so there must be a safety distance from other users, and the distance is proportional to the quantity of storage. Now, in Hong Kong, we have the advantage of gas pipelines. Half of it can be used for hydrogen, and then we can extract hydrogen from town gas for refilling. So we do not need a big storage on site, and so we can lower the risks. So in Hong Kong, we have to develop more hydrogen refilling facilities and stations. If we need large-scale on-site storage, we have to be more careful with the safety aspects. But if it is just from the pipes, then the safety distance can proportionally be shorter. The actual measurement would depend on the operation, but there is a way to balance the need for refilling and also to ensure a safe distance from other users. We have various options in Hong Kong. Thank you. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you, Chair. Last year, the Secretary promulgated the strategy of hydrogen development in Hong Kong, including 4 major strategies, namely improving legislation, establishing standards aligned with the market, and advancement with prudence. Now, we must have proper set of legislation in place to ensure the wide application of hydrogen in Hong Kong. We've got a few projects. Right now, we have to improve our legislation to lay a solid foundation for future application of hydrogen in Hong Kong. And I also agree with the Secretary. The Gas Safety Ordinance, CAP 51, has been well established in Hong Kong, and so far, hydrogen has not been included as a fuel. Now, to include hydrogen as fuel into the ordinance is an appropriate approach, but hydrogen as fuel is to be included under the ordinance. As we all know, if hydrogen is not used for fuel but for other uses, it is regulated under CAP 295 Dangerous Goods Ordinance. The trade may be very conversant with this, but the general public doesn't understand what is meant by fuel and what is not. For instance, for the propulsion of a vehicle or a train or operation of machinery, then it is fuel. It's easy to understand. But what about fuel for a gas, for welding, for connection, etc.? Is that gas regarded as fuel or not? Can the Secretary or the Director take this opportunity to explain to the public in future? How can you ensure that there will not be over-regulation, given that there will be 2 ordinances governing hydrogen in the future? And of course, we're concerned about gas safety. The EMSD will be responsible for gas safety when hydrogen is used as fuel. I'd like to consult the Secretary whether there is sufficient manpower in that department to regulate the safety of hydrogen as fuel or as other purposes. Thank you. Secretary. I thank Mr. Chen for his question. The question is whether hydrogen is being used as fuel or not, how to make that distinction. I would defer to the EMSD. And the other question is whether the EMSD has sufficient manpower and professional expertise. The reason why we propose to amend the Dangerous Goods Ordinance is because we're concerned about the safety of the gas when it's used as fuel. And we're concerned about the transportation and manufacture, etc. Now, the MSC has a wealth of experience in regulating gas safety. There are experts within the department. And for hydrogen, about 2 or close to 3 years ago, we started an interdepartmental working group to work on the use of hydrogen as fuel, and we oversaw projects, and then EMSD is a member of the working group, and we have also learned from overseas experience. So we have no worry whatsoever about the expertise of the EMSD in this regard. And as for manpower, the use of hydrogen as fuel will gradually increase. Right now, the manpower is sufficient, but if need be, we can boost this manpower. And I defer to the department to explain how to tell whether hydrogen is being used as fuel or not. Now, in working out the framework, relevant departments of the government have discussed at length this matter. The scenarios and risks involved in hydrogen for different purposes are different. We have category 2 dangerous goods covering hydrogen and other gases. They are well regulated, and stakeholders are very accustomed to that model of regulation. For the use of hydrogen as fuel, this is a new trend, and the nature, the supply chain, and also the use of hydrogen as fuel is very close to the other 3 kinds of gases in Hong Kong. And so we believe it is appropriate to amend the Dangerous Goods Ordinance so that we can have an effective regulatory framework in place. Now, when the ordinance is enacted, we believe there will be increased workload in vetting applications, in supervision, and patrol will make sure we have enough manpower to cope with that. As with more frequent use of hydrogen as fuel, we will envisage more workload, and we will keep reviewing our manpower to see whether we are capable. Let me declare interest. I'm a senior advisor to the CLP. Now we're already using hydrogen as fuel because our power companies are using hydrogen in our cooling system of power generators. Now, hydrogen is now regarded as kind of Cat 2 dangerous goods. It's being regulated by the Gas Safety Ordinance. I hope in future people have a better idea. Any supplement? No, thank you. Ms. Elizabeth Quat. Thank you, Chair. I always promote the use of hydrogen for fuel, and I fully support the current proposal, and it is a necessary and urgent move. It will effectively address the safety concerns of the general public. The most important thing is the source of hydrogen. I'd like to ask the administration whether will promote the manufacture of hydrogen in Hong Kong or to import it from the mainland in the form of liquefied hydrogen. And for promotion and use of hydrogen, we expect a proper plan from the government. And I'd like to know the government's view on the construction of hydrogen refilling station. In particular, do you have any choices or any locations in mind in the northern metropolis? Thank you. Secretary. As set out in our strategy, we will have standards and legislation to govern the use of hydrogen, and we will assess the market to introduce and use of hydrogen. But then we will it will be a market-led approach when it comes to the pace in the use of hydrogen. There are already power companies planning to supply hydrogen in Hong Kong. Our Hong Kong gas company also is producing natural hydrogen, and there will be green hydrogen. And we also have a program with China China Petrol in Hong Kong for such manufacturing, and we will have a framework as regards the scale and what will be the major source of supply. It will depend on market forces, whether the prices are competitive, etc. Hopefully, we can develop an industry in this regard. Ms. Kwat also asked about the location or plan of hydrogen refilling facilities. Hopefully, in the NT, in Kowloon, and on Hong Kong Island, we will have such facilities each, and bus companies will also have these facilities. So that should basically suit our need as a start, and for future development, it depends on the market need. There are different types of refilling stations. At first, the first type is large storage on site that would require a longer safety distance. But if it is from pipes, then the distance can be shorter. And you asked about future studies. In our new energy for transportation fund, we have funding to support these studies. In our low carbon research fund, we've also got money to do that. Our interdepartmental working group will keep reviewing the outcome of local research studies and possible applications. And in local application, we will see whether there are opportunities for further development, and they can be included in our projects, and then we will carry out various trial projects. Thank you. Ms. Chen Yutming, thank you. I support the amendment of the gas safety ordinance so that we can have a legislative basis for developing hydrogen use in Hong Kong. First, I'd like to ask about manufacture. We have processing of landfill gases. This is different from the production of town gas. Now, I'd like to know what is the initial idea when it comes to the regulation of manufacture in Hong Kong, and what about the storage and supply of hydrogen fuel? The government is studying the feasibility of having such facilities at different locations that can include changing our LPG refilling facilities to hydrogen refilling stations. However, let's say in some Taipo Road and Hong Ham LPG refilling stations, they are quite close to residential areas. I hope the administration can review the situation in local areas, and please ensure that you allay the concerns of the public by proper public education and publicity. We can become demonstration zone in this area, and we can also cooperate with the other cities of GBA. I'd like to know whether the current amendments will cover cross-boundary applications, or would you do this through other pieces of subsidiary legislation? Thank you. Secretary. Thank you. On the requirements governing manufacture of hydrogen, I defer to the EMSD later. Cross-boundary application, as said, we do have cooperation with other cities of the GBA to ensure that we align with their standards. I also want to align with international standards so we can export our products as well as technology in the future. For cross-boundary application, we have a working group set up with the Kwun province to discuss the application of cross-boundary hydrogen vehicles. and also the establishment of hydrogen refilling stations on two sides of the border. All these are covered in the working group. As regards refilling stations located at densely populated areas, obviously these areas are not really suitable for such installations because we need a minimum safety distance. So if the petroleum and refilling stations are to be placed together, we will duly consider the safety aspect. At really densely populated areas, there won't be any refilling or recharging facilities. As for the manufacturing requirements, I defer to my colleagues.
Thank you, Ms. Chen, for your question. In our amendment to the GSO, Gas Safety Ordinance, we regulate the entire supply chain, including the manufacture, storage, transport, and supply. In the future, we're going to introduce subsidiary legislation which will regulate the quality of hydrogen and hydrogen containers. We regulate the entire supply chain. Next, Mr. Tong. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I express support for the amendment to the GSO on using hydrogen in the future. There will be a legal basis thanks to the amendment to the GSO. We have grey hydrogen and grey hydrogen as well. It may not achieve our purpose in relation to carbon emissions. There may not be much difference in relation to green hydrogen and grey hydrogen when it comes to our regulation. Storage is close to members' heart as well. In relation to the storage of hydrogen, apart from safety concerns, will the volume be significant? I understand there will be liquid hydrogen, so will the volume be smaller? After all, we do need land and space. Sometimes there may be changes in the amount of space needed. Well, I think we should factor in this factor. Otherwise, we may not be able to keep up with the times when there are future changes. We need to plan well so that we can cater for future changes. In relation to repair and maintenance, what about talents? Apart from registration, is training also provided? So for those who aspire to join this trade, there will be channels for them to undergo training. Secretary, thank you, member, for your question. When it comes to gray hydrogen and green hydrogen or even blue hydrogen, when gray hydrogen doesn't emit carbon dioxide, then we have blue hydrogen. In relation to green hydrogen is all about renewable energy. In relation to the manufacture, storage, transport, and use of hydrogen is actually the same. So we adopt the same set of standards, safety standards in relation to green, blue, or gray hydrogen. Regarding the differences among green hydrogen, blue hydrogen, and gray hydrogen, we do need a certification system as to the green hydrogen. we are developing this certification system. So we hope that by 2027, we'll be able to develop a certification system on green hydrogen, which will be conducive to the use of green hydrogen in the market. In relation to the storage area, indeed, given the low density, the storage area will be larger. The space required will also be larger as a result. We may not need a large storage area. And that is our advantage. Few countries around the world are like us. I'll give the floor to my colleague about the training of talents. Regarding training talents, the EMSD has been working with different suppliers as well as professional bodies. We explore talents in relation to hydrogen as fuel as well as practitioners. We provide training to ensure the use, repair of the hydrogen systems. We need to ensure the safety. In June 2024, we signed an MOU with the China Inspection Company. In relation to Shanghai Referral Group, that is the manufacturer of hydrogen fuel system, the VTC signed an MOU with this body in June 2024. They provide different kinds of training for talents in Hong Kong. The aim is to groom more hydrogen talents. We will also be heightening the awareness of practitioners in this area. Just now, the Secretary mentioned pipelines. Can we share the use of pipelines? Well, at present, when the gas companies don't allow the other side to use the pipelines, do we need to build other pipelines? These are about commercial arrangements. Energy suppliers are in talks with us. We can solve all these issues in the market. Thank you. Next member, Ms. Carmen Khan. I have 3 questions. I'd like to write on Mr. Tong Nite's point. In paragraph 11 of the papers, by 2027, we're going to enhance the safety framework. More importantly, we need to work on standard alignment as well as energy audit. There is no standard across different countries around the world. Some countries use ISO. So when we're going to align with our country, what is your plan on standardization? For example, how to define green energy and blue energy, how we can encourage the trade to use energy audits. All these are interlinked. In the PowerPoint, it mentions applications. This time around, we are going to introduce amendments to 2 ordinances. In the PowerPoint, I saw that hydrogen as fuel is to be used for the propulsion of a vehicle or train or the operation of machinery. So what about vessels? Do we need to amend legislation again? The policy address mentioned using fuel on vessels, and the use of hydrogen wasn't mentioned. In relation to the Interdepartmental Working Group, one of the tasks is to enable wide application of hydrogen projects. It will also make suggestions, and I'd like to know what is being done right now. In relation to vessels, the Marine Department will amend legislation to allow hydrogen to be used. I'll give the floor to the EMSD for them to tell you more about their work. In relation to the certification system, members right. In relation to the certification of green hydrogen, there is no global standard that is accepted by all. So we are working with the State Administration for Market Regulation. We have a common goal. We want the standard to be aligned with the global standard. Just how you mentioned the ISO, it is one of our considerations. We have similar work underway in relation to the ISO. If we can complete it by 2027, we'll be leading other countries in this regard. If we can set up a certification system for green hydrogen and if can be globally recognized, we can sell our green hydrogen products to the international market, given the fact that it is recognized all over the world. This will help with the internationalization of products for our country. Regarding the promotion or commercialization of hydrogen by the Interdepartmental Working Group, as I mentioned just now, first of all, we'll encourage research through the Green Tech Fund, and we will also help Hong Kong to carry out different tests with the NET Fund, New Energy Transport Fund. When we have new technologies, we can identify suitable application scenarios through the Interdepartmental Working Group. Then we may even encourage commercialization. An example is that we can use hydrogen as power generators. Then we can try to generate power for remote areas. We find it a good idea to use hydrogen to provide power or to generate power. A few companies are in touch with us, and we are talking about the implementation details. Regarding vessels, I'll give the floor to the EMSD. Thank you. Within the government, we have conducted in-depth studies and analyses. For land gas, that is LPG, petrol, and so on, we'll cover it under our regulation. In relation to new energy or new renewable energy used by vessels, it is regulated by the Marine Department. Ammonia, liquefied hydrogen, this will be regulated under the Merchant Shipping Local Vessels Ordinance, Cap 548. So you're only regulating that use on land. For those used by vessels, they will be regulated by the AMD, Marine Department. I'm just layman. If we have low altitude economy and if we can use hydrogen as fuel, do we need to introduce amendments by the Civil Aviation Department, CAD? Secretary, they are already working on legislative amendments. Vessels may use green energy, so they will cover hydrogen as well. Next, Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, Chairman. On regulating hydrogen as fuel and amendments to the GSO, I support it. It helps us regulate the manufacture, importation, storage, transport, supply, and use of hydrogen used as fuel. In the long run, it will be conducive to the development of hydrogen industries. Transportation and storage of hydrogen is costly. The supply chain of the industry is not very mature. That's why hydrogen is not popularized yet. What plans does the administration have to promote it in the GBA in Foshan? It sees rapid development of hydrogen as far as I understand. Do you have any plans on research and manufacture of hydrogen? That way we can grow the pipe bigger. In relation to HFC vehicles, many members are concerned about hydrogen fueling station or hydrogen refueling station. If we need to turn petrol filling stations into hydrogen refueling station and build quick chargers or fast chargers, how can we avoid duplication? In the coming 5 years or 10 years, there will be more chargers in car parks. The market changes very fast. So you need to take action right now in order to avoid duplication. Otherwise, you won't have to remove the facilities and build new facilities. Secretary, on the use of hydrogen, there is great potential. We will start with vehicles. But we are talking about heavy vehicles. If we use hydrogen on private cars, whether in Hong Kong or our country, I don't see much future in this regard. Even for heavy vehicles, they only use on long journey heavy vehicles. Say, well, that is the way forward. There is great advantage. So it's not possible that all vehicles will use hydrogen in Hong Kong. Instead, there will only be heavy vehicles. So there won't be a lot of hydrogen refueling stations in the urban area. That's why we don't have any concerns in this area. We promote the use of hydrogen because the greatest potential is power generators. We believe there will be much more potential, but we'll have to wait for a decrease in the price so that we can popularize it. That's why we are preparing for the legislative amendments. 3 different funds, say the Green Tech Fund, will try to use it in a larger scale. Just now, as I mentioned, we have a network of pipelines, so we can use hydrogen all over Hong Kong. This is our edge. That's why we can provide energy all over Hong Kong. We don't need to worry about conflicts between petrol filling stations and hydrogen refueling stations.
Mr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chair. This panel and the EEB in August 2023 had a duty visit to the GBA to observe new energy facilities there. For hydrogen, we mainly visited Foshan in Nanhai. They were already very proactive in the use of hydrogen. We tried out some hydrogen fuel commercial vehicles. there were already over 1,000 hydrogen fuel vehicles plying the roads there. And we also visited the refueling stations. And I think the refueling pipes are very much like petroleum pipes. Now, we are amending legislation to regulate the use of hydrogen in fuel. Actually, we're also removing some of the restrictions to allow the trial use of hydrogen fuel vehicles so that there can be a legal basis for the use of such vehicles. I support the proposed amendments. Perhaps at this stage, the amendments will not cover too many technical aspects because the technology is still developing, but at least we have a framework for regulating the use of hydrogen as fuel, and that will allow us to carry out trial projects, and therefore I support the proposed amendments. I have a few technical questions to ask. I understand that there may still be changes in the future. When we observed the refueling facilities, there was one consideration. They used a vehicle to transport hydrogen to the refueling facilities. So during transportation, the gas were not compressed. Compression was only done at the refueling facilities, and the facilities were hoarded up for safety reasons. So I don't know whether the administration has already considered such details. Will transportation be done by vehicles or by pipelines or by sea? Now, if it is by pipelines, as asked by some members, Hong Kong Gas is already carrying out some trials which are successful so far. So if we are to use hydrogen as fuel in the future, I'd like to know whether transportation by pipelines is a competitive edge for us. Secretary, thank you. Indeed, transport is a major factor when it comes to whether hydrogen as fuel can be widely used. We will not require a specific mode of transport. Any mode can be acceptable so long as they follow our established standards and requirements. You talked about the transportation by means of cylinders and further compression at the refilling facilities, etc. In fact, there are other ways and means being researched into. For instance, there is one way by means of liquefied gas, and it can be gasified again. And another way is by means of solidified form. So there is no pressure involved. So once water is added, hydrogen can be produced. Different technologies are still developing. If you ask us which one is the cheapest and most reliable form, I think it is premature to say so now, given that the situation is still developing. But I believe there can be cheaper and safer means of transportation in the future. We will not dictate a certain mode of transport so long as it is safe and reliable. Thank you. Mr. Kwun, thank you. I understand that the legislation will be drafted to suit the development needs. As the Secretary said, smaller vehicles will tend to use electricity, and for large vehicles, it is more cost-effective to use hydrogen as fuel. Another question is manpower training. I'd like to ask the administration the manpower requirement. How many mechanics, local mechanics, will you need to join this sector? If you can have early projection and training, I believe this sector should be attractive to workers. And the second question is, in the past, we have had incidents involving LPG taxis near residential areas. So for hydrogen vehicles, will repair and maintenance be done mainly at large depots instead of locations close to residential areas? Of course, we will feel more assured if they can be further away from residential areas, but it all depends on the government's planning as well. And going back to the question of manpower, I'm sure people responsible for repair maintenance will have to be certified. But then technology is ever developing. What will be the requirement on their taking a refresher training, etc.? What will be the cycle for their further training? All right, I'll defer to my colleagues. All right, talk about manpower training and requirements. As mentioned in the strategy, we tend to proceed in a prudent manner in the development in hydrogen development in Hong Kong. The pace of local development will depend on future technology and the market situation so that our development can be really cost effective. It is premature to say how much manpower we need to nurture, but we keep our liaison with professional organizations and trade associations in thinking of training programs they need. These programs are for our technicians, and the scale of training can be adjusted according to market needs. Suppliers and these companies are also responsible for manpower development, and we will adjust our scale and coverage of manpower development as appropriate. What about the area of maintenance? In our subsidiary association, we will cover the whole supply chain of hydrogen, including the installation, construction of use of hydrogen installation, registration of hydrogen supply company, use of hydrogen system, and permit for hydrogen conveyance vehicle, etc. So the repair and maintenance places of such facilities will come under the construction and use of hydrogen installation, subject to the regulation of the EMSD. Thank you. Mr. Lau Kok-fan, I support the proposed amendments, but then this amendment will help to improve our regulation of the use of hydrogen as fuel. I believe there should be scope in the proposed legislation to allow two things to happen. First is the source of hydrogen. For instance, we can have electrolytes. It is also a form of renewable energy. And there will be more and more standards for the use of hydrogen in the future. And secondly, It's true that the current legislation will mainly regulate the use of hydrogen as fuel. But then we should also consider the use of hydrogen for medical purposes. That can be a future direction for development. I'd like to know whether there will be possible room built in the legislation to cater for new developments.
Secretary, thank you for your questions. I'd like to answer Dr. Hui Simon Lee's questions from two perspectives. One, on the legislative amendments this time round, our focus is to regulate the use of hydrogen as fuel in the future. We need to make sure it's safe in relation to the methods for production or the use of fuel. We are not going to impose any limitations in this area. We want to develop a safety standard for hydrogen so that as long as one meets the safety standard, one can use hydrogen and develop it in this manner. We keep our mind open and we're only going to regulate the use of hydrogen in order to make sure it's safe. Regarding new methods to produce hydrogen, say electrolytes and so on, just now I already mentioned green hydrogen. I believe in the future, in the long run, green hydrogen will be used, but this is not the content within the legislative amendment this time round. We have already started a green hydrogen standard certification with our mainland counterpart. Regarding new technologies for producing green hydrogen, will there be any price advantage? We want to make use of certification to promote it to the international market. Within the current term government, by 2027, we'll have the timeline. So we work on two main fronts: one, safety; two, certification. Next, Mr. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I welcome the legislative amendments from the administration. It makes sure the safety of the use of hydrogen. Just now we mentioned green hydrogen refueling for vessels. It is dealt with by way of COP instead of subsidiary legislation. I notice that the administration will introduce subsidiary legislation to regulate other areas. I'd like to know why they are not the same. Is it because of safety reasons you use subsidiary legislation? It is more complicated. Just now, members think that hydrogen is more dangerous, hence more concerns about repair and maintenance of hydrogen vehicles. We've been in discussion about hydrogen vehicle mechanics for close to 2 decades. The EMSD said that the relevant work had been done, and you are waiting for some departments to work on legislative amendments. Is that really the situation? Over 10% of the vehicles are EVs. For the repair and maintenance, it takes special techniques as well as experience. So there's an urgent need. I'd like to know what the administration is waiting for. I'll give the floor to the EMSD to answer Mr. Frankie Yik's question. Thank you, member, for your question. Hydrogen development is rapid. So for our proposed subsidiary legislation, we're going to use negative vetting. That's why we'll have to discuss with suppliers and the trade much work. That's exactly why we want to allow flexibility. That way we'll better cater for the needs of the industry. I understand, but isn't it much easier with the use of COP? Well, under the subsidiary legislation, there will be COP and guidelines. In the pilot scheme, there are already some COPs, but they are not regulated by legislation right now. In the future, they will be covered under the ordinance. At present, there are voluntary schemes, and I'll give the floor to Mr. Eric Wong to give you more details about the implementation in this area. In relation to the voluntary registration scheme, there are high voltage, low voltage mechanics as well as general knowledge programs. We have already started work in this area. Some mechanics have already signed up for this program, that is the voluntary registration scheme for vehicle mechanics. As I mentioned, this registration scheme has been discussed for 2 decades. We have EVs, we have hydrogen fuel or hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and in the future we're going to have methanol vehicles as well. So Mr. Frankie Yek wants you to pick up your pace. Thank you. Some members asked about the directions. I agree. I need to commend the administration for their efforts. Earlier on, the strategy of hydrogen development in Hong Kong was announced. Indeed, in the first meeting of 2025, an amendment bill is discussed, and this is crucial to future development of hydrogen. When we have the regulatory framework, there will be a legal basis for the development of hydrogen in the future. I'd like to focus on hydrogen as fuel. But what about non-hydrogen as fuel? That is hydrogen that is not going to be used as fuel. Will there be a loophole? Will it be not covered? Mr. Tong mentioned different states of hydrogen, say liquefied hydrogen. When there are new technologies, will they be covered by this ordinance as well? Or do you need to make further amendments when new technologies arise? This step is crucial, but in relation to the strategy of hydrogen development in Hong Kong, there's more work to be done, say the industrial chain, research and development, hydrogen and green energy transport. Earlier on, you announced the green transformation roadmap of public buses and taxis. Will you announce more information in relation to using hydrogen in public transport? That's what I want to ask the administration. Thank you. Regarding hydrogen not used as fuel as well as different states of hydrogen, I'll give the floor to my colleague. At present, we are still promoting the use of hydrogen. So we are providing support to research and development through the Green Tech Fund, whereas we are supporting the use of hydrogen in different vehicles through the New Energy Transport Fund. There are also cross-boundary vehicles. At present, we are encouraging the pilot use of hydrogen in different application scenarios. We want to see in which areas we have price advantage. Very soon, there will be cross-boundary vehicles using hydrogen as energy. There will be pilot projects. For the department, thank you. In relation to the definition of hydrogen as fuel, liquid hydrogen is already included. Within the government, there were internal discussions. Hydrogen as fuel and hydrogen not used as fuel is different in relation to safety and the use. Stakeholders have been accustomed to this regulation model. That's why this regulation only applies to hydrogen as fuel. All right, all members have asked questions regarding this item. According to the administration paper, it plans to introduce the amendment bill to the Legislative Council in the second quarter in 2025. And this will be done the soonest in the fourth quarter of 2025 if all work goes smooth. All right, next, proposed amendments to Buildings Energy Efficiency Ordinance, CAP 610. We welcome Mr. Ted to stay behind to introduce the papers to us. We have Mr. Chen from the EMSD, Ms. Polly Kwok, Deputy Secretary for Environment and Ecology, Mr. Derek Chow, Acting Principal Assistant Secretary from the EEB, as well as Mr. Wallace Lang, Chief Engineer from the EMSD as well.
好，唔該晒。咁咧，我而家
All right, thank you. Now I'll ask the administration and the secretary to walk us through this paper. Thank you, Chairman. To improve building electricity efficiency in a 2023 policy address, the Chief Executive proposed to amend the Buildings Energy Efficiency Ordinance and conduct industry consultation. It aims to expand the regulation to shorten the interval of energy audits and so on. We expect that we can save an additional 50 million kilowatt hours of electricity if all plans go well. That is equivalent to the annual electricity consumption of about 15,000 three-person households. The industry was generally supportive of our proposals. Between March and April, we plan to introduce the amendment bill to the Council. In order to give the industry sufficient time upon the passage of the bill in the Council, we propose to gazette the bill, and they will only take effect after 15 months upon gazettal in order to give the public more time. Now I'll give the floor to the Chief Engineer of the EMSD to walk members through the papers as well as the amendments. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, members. This ordinance came into effect in 2012. It covers 13 types of buildings. For the other two types of buildings, every 10 years, these buildings have to undergo energy audits in order to encourage carbon reduction we make a total of 5 suggested proposals. First of all, data centers will be covered by the regulation. There is rapid development in data centers. Data centers power consumption surpass 4% on the Hong Kong's total electricity consumption. By 2035, we expect that we can save an additional 50 million kilowatt hours of electricity.
多類別嘅
Second amendment will require more buildings to conduct regular energy audits. From 2 to we increase that to 11. And according to energy audit reports received, the energy utilization index of buildings that have gone through all energy audits have dropped by 20% on average. And for larger buildings, energy audits will be more cost effective. And so we propose here that with the exception of data centers, small and medium-sized buildings with a gross floor area not exceeding 7,000 square meters will be exempted from conducting energy audits. Now, they will only comprise about 10% of the total electricity consumption for the corresponding building types, but we believe that we will be able to save the energy consumption regulated will increase by 1.4 times from around 3.9 billion to around 9.5 billion kilowatt. So we expect another 450 million kWh of electricity saved. And we also propose to shorten the interval of energy audits from 10 years to 5 years. That will make us comparable to neighboring regions such as the mainland, Singapore, etc. Now, for a building with over 7,000 square meters in area, now if there can be energy audit done, then the cost the electricity cost will only reduce by 1%. And then we also require the disclosure of technical data in energy audit reports. We're already requiring that, but after the amendment, we hope that more information covering energy efficiency, coefficient, year of service, control system, energy saving potential, etc., can be included so that the public can have a better idea of the energy performance of buildings concerned. Such disclosure will also enable trade to proactively offer energy saving proposals to building owners, and this can expedite the implementation of energy saving measures. The last amendment is to include professional engineer of energy discipline as one of the eligibilities for registration as registered energy assessor. Now, such assessors will verify the energy audits and to help owners to improve their the performance of the buildings. Now, in future, registered professional engineer of energy discipline will be included as one of the eligibilities, because when the regulation was first set up, there was no such discipline in the Hong Kong Institute of Engineers. Now we propose to add this, and because of this, we will also include a professional engineer of energy discipline in member compositions of the building's energy efficiency disciplinary appeal panel as well as the appeal board panels. Now we have organized a number of consultation forums. Over 3,000 organizations have been consulted, and we have received views supporting the proposal, and we've also got the support of the Energy Advisory Committee and the Council for Carbon Neutrality and Sustainable Development. Subject to the passage of the bill, we will commence the part to include the professional engineer of energy discipline as one of the eligibilities 3 months after Gazetto, and then the remaining provisions will come into effect 15 months after Gazetto. Thank you. 6 members have pressed a request to speak button. Each will have 4 minutes, covering both questions and answers. I will read out the order: Mr. Luk Chung Ho, Mr. Lo Kwun, Mr. Robert Lee, Mr. Tony Zhang, Mr. Chan Siu Hong, and then Ms. Elizabeth Kwun. First, Mr. Luk Chung Ho. Thank you, Chair. First, I support the proposal. It is in keeping with the times because data centers indeed consume a lot of electricity. What about supercomputing centers? Will they be included? Oh, so, all right, they are covered. Okay. So my understanding is correct. I think this is the right way forward. However, I have a few questions to ask. First, for energy standards, how can you prevent the following situation? The building may perform well in terms of energy efficiency, but after it is commissioned, owners may remove the energy saving installations. Would that happen? And secondly, I think it is a global trend to have standards for carbon emission because there is great correlation between carbon emission and energy efficient, although the two are not equivalent. Carbon emission is just part of the energy efficiency performance. And carbon emission will cover the use of fuel and also the type of materials used for construction, etc. So will we have carbon emission efficiency standards as well? The current amendment is rather technical and minor in nature. Secretary, whether it is possible for buildings to turn back in terms of energy efficiency, this is quite rare because energy efficiency can lower the electricity bill. The only cost is the capital setup, and upon commissioning, there can be gain in energy efficiency. So we've seldom come across such scenarios. There may be the initial setup cost, but further on, such installations can help to save money. And we do understand that ultimately our goal is to reduce carbon emission and to have carbon audits. Energy efficiency is also vital to carbon audit. Carbon energy emission is a very important part of carbon emissions. So we will start with energy efficiency first. Carbon emission reduction will be something for the future. Can I ask a further question? It is in relation to the principle of the policy. Now, the requirements will apply to new buildings as well as major retrofittings. Do you have a clear definition for retrofittings? All right. What is meant by retrofitting works? The ordinance was first enacted in 2011, so it has more than a decade of operation. The definition is clear. Now, we have clear definition of for major retrofitting works. We talk about over 500 square meters. And if the energy consumption is up to a certain threshold, then the building will have to meet the new standards. And we have also added new buildings to the list, new types of buildings to the list, so as to further enhance energy consumption, or rather energy saving. Mr. Lo Wai Kwok, the proposal to amend the buildings energy efficiency ordinance is to enhance our energy efficiency management regime. Now, I am all for this because if we want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, then the supplier and users of power should both work together. Most of our power consumption is due to buildings. So we should enhance energy efficiency management. We should shorten the cycle of energy audits. We should also enhance the disclosure of technical data in energy audit reports. We should also cover data centers. And we should also cover buildings for educational purpose, for community services, municipal services building, and airport, passenger terminal building, etc. All these buildings should perform better in energy efficiency. I like the idea that professional engineer of energy discipline should be included as one of the eligibilities for registration as REA, Registered Energy Assessor. As said in the paper back in 2014, the RPE and MHKRE has been established. So I support the addition of this new discipline to the category of registered energy assessors. We've also got we have also got engineer of energy discipline in other institute as well, so they should be included so that they can use their expertise to help energy audits in buildings. This is a win-win situation. The discipline itself can develop and it can also serve the community. So I fully support this proposal. Dr. Low indicated his support for the proposal. Any response from the Secretary? I thank Dr. Low for his views. And as his suggestion of adding the Institute of Qualified Environmental Protection Engineers, well, I will consider that in the future. Mr. Robert Lee, the proposal is to include data centers in our regulatory regime. So standalone data centers and portions of industrial buildings built as and converted to data centers will be covered. Together, they will help us to save an additional 50 million kilowatts hours of electricity annually. I understand that there is a great demand for data centers by small and medium-sized companies. And the government is proposing to shorten the interval of energy audits from 10 to 5 years. That will put us on par with neighboring regions such as the mainland, Singapore, and Tokyo in Japan. During public consultation, I understand that there were views saying that this may add to companies' operating costs and management fees may also be higher, and that would mean financial burden on owners. I'd like to know the administration's response to the financial burden on owners and users of buildings. And it is also said in the paper that 15 months after Gazato, the provisions in the bill will come into effect. I'd like to know whether that is sufficient time for the stakeholders to comply with the regulation, and is it possible to lengthen the period if need be?
Secretary, thank you, member, for your question. Legislation requires audits instead of the completion of any works, so 15 months are sufficient. And I will add more categories of engineers, so manpower is not a cause for concern. In relation to impact on the economy, we have conducted an in-depth study in relation to business environment. The cost ranges from several $1,000s to $10,000 to $2,000. All the analyses show that this can help them save costs. It will not drive up the operational costs, so there will be a positive impact. But of course, we understand for smaller scale companies, $10,000 to $20,000 might be a burden to these companies as well. That's why we have a requirement that only floor area of 7,000 square meters plus are subject to the requirement of energy audits, so the industry do not have to worry. In long run, there will be a positive impact on the economy. Next, Mr. Tong. Thank you, Deputy Chair. First of all, I support the amendment to the BEEO, Buildings Energy Efficiency Ordinance. I hope the administration will review the eligibility of registered energy assessors. More categories of assessors can be added if need be. What is the incentive of conducting audits? Companies look at returns. The return period is rather short, and there will be a decrease in expenses or expenditure. Is it possible to reduce energy consumption after the audit? It doesn't seem so to me. Will you further shorten the audit? Shorten the time taken to conduct the audit? If there is no benefit for companies to conduct an energy audit, companies may simply file an application form that may not achieve our goal. Just now, Dr. Lo Kwok mentioned the product per se is important. You need to make it more energy efficient. We used to say for the common parts of residential areas, there were subsidies from the administration. Unless there are products with much higher energy efficiency, well, I'd like to know what the administration thinks. Will you be imposing any restrictions? District cooling systems help different districts. For those with rather good energy consumption, what will the future be? If there are no products with better energy efficiency, companies are simply going through the motions. Mr. Tong is right. There is no legal requirement as to what follows an energy audit. If the energy audits help companies save money, I believe they will definitely do it, but there is no legal requirement. Every 5 years, there will be new products, but we don't just look at products. As time moves on, more products will achieve better energy efficiency. 5 years later, if the system doesn't function as well, then the energy efficiency will drop. Adjustments need to be made. So for a company, conducting energy audits every 5 years is a good idea. Financial incentives matter. Say for common parts of residential buildings, it's difficult to ask all owners to contribute. Is it possible to work more on this front? Let's not just look at the financial incentives. Say they can enhance the system, the companies can enhance the system. They may have to spend on system enhancements. Incentives don't necessarily have to be money. Not all people aim at getting goodies. Some work for the benefit of the environment. They feel that they have the responsibility for environmental protection. Well, some can save money, and we also request disclosure of information, and that is for the benefit of companies' image. Regarding major companies, C groups or listed companies, there are ESG requirements. So these companies will be driven to comply with this requirement as well. They may make improvements following the energy audit reports. Next member, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. In the Hong Kong Climate Action Plan 2050, energy saving is one of the directions. We need to reduce power consumption in buildings by 20 to 40%. So we need to enhance our regulation over building electricity efficiency. I'm a senior advisor to the CLP. I support the amendment to the BEEO. Some buildings will be made mandatory to conduct energy audits. And the interval of energy audits will be shortened from 10 years to 5 years. Just now, some members asked whether there would be financial pressure on stakeholders. Isn't there sufficient manpower to conduct energy audits? I believe the EEB and the EMSD must have conduct assessments. Much human resource is involved as well. I'd also like to take this opportunity to ask the EMSD. That is recalibration. It has been conducted on government buildings. Through regular checks, different methods were used to reduce energy consumption. So I'd like to ask about this retro commissioning and retrofitting charter program. Next, in relation to data centers, they have significant power consumption. As I understand, different countries around the world, especially the mainland, say Beijing and Shanghai, they have PUE values for data centers. The ceiling is for those above 1.4, they wouldn't be approved. They would only consider approving those at or below 1.3. It, however, concerns carbon emissions. So, in our efforts to achieve carbon neutrality and enhance power efficiency, data centers are very important pillars in our future I&T development. Does the Secretary have anything to share with us in this regard? I'll give the floor to the EMSD. I'll first talk about data centers now. Data centers are new economic growth points. They are very important industries indeed. They use a great amount of power. This time around, energy audits involve data centers as well. We need to reduce carbon emissions at source, so we have a goal. We need to cut carbon emissions by half. Then, we'll have to take action to reduce carbon emissions. We need to enhance the energy efficiency of data centers. If we can improve the energy efficiency of buildings, the total costs will plummet. Electricity prices will drop as well. That way we can enhance our economic edge of Hong Kong. The goal is to enhance our competitive edge when it comes to the economy. In relation to recalibration, I'll give the floor to the EMSD. There are close to 1,000 registered energy assessors, and there are 200 or so engineers. Close to 100 are registered right now. So we believe the number will further increase. In the market, there are sufficient engineers. If the energy audit cycle is shortened from 10 years to 5 years, then we'll need more talents and manpower. We hope more assessors will join this industry if they have the relevant experience required. We focus on energy efficiency in relation to recalibration. Use is the main point, or retro commissioning. So we have issued code of practice. We have been sharing this with the industry. The administration is taking the lead, and we have done so for hundreds of buildings. We hope to achieve synergy and share our professional know-how in relation to technologies. So we'll be able to encourage the industry to do this together. Thank you.
Chair, allow me to supplement for collaboration and for regional commissioning. The mainland attaches a lot of importance to that, and with the support and promotion of the EPD, the trade is gradually attaching importance to this, and will introduce this too. Now, retro commissioning will set standards and guidelines so that there can be further collaboration within Hong Kong and GBA. This will help to promote further audits now. If there is no follow-up after an energy audit, then it's pointless. But if we have retro commissioning, and if there are sufficient practitioners in the trade to rectify or recommission areas with room for improvement, then gradually we can replace some of the installations or some of the flow can be readjusted that can greatly enhance the energy efficiency. I think this is worthy of further support and promotion from the administration. Thank you, Mr. Chen. That is exactly why we are promoting energy audits and why we are increasing the number of eligible REAs, because sometimes building management may not have such information or knowledge. Now, if they have REAs to do it, and if they know that the audits or schemes can help them to make savings, for sure they will be more acceptable to retro commissioning. Thank you. Ms. Elizabeth Kwun. Thank you. This legislation has been in place for a long time, and the interval of energy audit is 10 years. I support the tightening of the bill. The question is how we can promote follow-up action and retro commissioning after an audit. For large organizations and listed companies, they do care for their image or ESG, and they already are doing this. We have seen commercial buildings and shopping malls with better energy efficiency performance with power savings. We, of course, welcome that, but still they are in the minority. And we welcome a 5-year energy audit interval, but we do not have a strong carrot and stick system. We want them to improve their ESG or image and to make savings. But will that incentive be sufficient? Will you consider some penalty or incentive mechanism? Of maybe not in this round of amendment, but perhaps you should have a better mechanism in place to encourage people to take action after an energy audit. Because if there is no follow-up action after an energy audit, it's useless. And yet there is nothing in the legislation to mandate follow-up action. We've seen shopping malls where the temperature is freezing. So are some commercial buildings. It seems that the owners don't care about the power consumption. Whereas in Beijing and Singapore and other places, they have a penalty as well as incentive mechanism. While you may not be able to include that in your current legislation, will you review the situation if the legislation is not as effective as anticipated? Will you provide incentives as well as penalties? Will you collect data and set standards and then grade buildings on the basis of their energy efficiency performance? Secretary, thank you. As mentioned by a number of members, the current system only require an energy audit and whether this is sufficient for promoting energy saving. Now, if we say that energy efficiency should be done at all costs, of course we should go further. But currently, that may not be necessary. Because after an energy audit, we usually see some energy saving achievements. So right now, I don't think we need to make it mandatory or to introduce penalties. We rather should leave it to the companies to decide on their own, and they can then take follow-up action when the time is right for them. I think that will be better. I think it would be more acceptable to the market. So we're increasing eligible REAs. We are increasing the frequency of energy audits. We believe this is a proper way of going forward. Whether we will introduce more measures, it will depend on the effectiveness. Then when will you review the effectiveness of your current system so that you can consider taking further action? Every 3 to 5 years, we have one round of legislative amendments. This is usually what we do, and so this is the time frame. Thank you. Ms. Judy Chen, Vice Chairman. Thank you. I'm also concerned about how we can encourage buildings, now not the large enterprises, but other buildings to care for their energy performance. While we may not want to make it mandatory, we can just add to your current system of disclosure. You require them to disclose technical data. You can give some credit, give some rating to these buildings. Well, we are not talking about imposing a fine, but it's just like buying electrical appliances. There is an energy efficiency label. Can you have a similar system for buildings? For buildings that are doing well, of course, they will publicize themselves. But for buildings that are performing rather badly, will we also publicize them? Secretary, our objective is to promote this idea, and in so doing, we should send out a positive message. We should let buildings know that they can save money by being energy efficient. And for some buildings, they are not taking any action, probably due to financial considerations. Now, if we give them some rating that may be provoking to some of the buildings, and if we make it mandatory, perhaps this is not the right time. So we just require an energy audit, and buildings can decide whether they should do something to make energy savings. If it is for financial reasons, they decide to defer their action, so be it. Right now, we should just promote the benefits of energy efficiency. We require them to disclose technical data, and most buildings want to improve the image or because of ESG principles will do something about it. So we should, at this stage, just promote the benefits of energy efficiency, and we should send out a positive message. Now, if we believe that promotion is not being effective and we need to step up our efforts, then we can consider further steps. I do appreciate that, Chair, but I think we must expedite our process because in mainland and EU, they are talking about a carbon market. I understand that we are not mature enough as a market in carbon trading, but can we use something like an energy efficiency label? Maybe we'll not talk about any monetary incentives, but we can, for instance, give green credits. You should take this opportunity to start a study on this, because this should be the future direction for us. Yes, Chair, allow me to say this. Different places have different strategies for carbon reduction. In some places, they may really have to rely on such means to reduce carbon reduction. But for us to achieve carbon neutrality, we focus the problem at source, which is power generation. So our approach is totally different. We have a very clear roadmap for carbon reduction. And we want to enhance energy efficiency and lower power consumption. If we can lower our total energy consumption, then we can then reduce the cost for power generation. If we want to lower our power energy generation by half, then the capital cost will also be cut by half. So we focus on cost effectiveness. If we use fiscal measures, then that may lower the cost effectiveness of some buildings. We need not necessarily follow the path of other places. Any more? No? Thank you. All members have asked questions. I thank the administration. Again, the administration, Mr. Luk Chung Ho. Right. The administration plans to present an amendment bill to the Council in March or April this year. The purpose or the intention is to let the amendments to come into full operation within 2026. I think this bill will come before the one for regulating hydrogen as fuel. Any question? If not, then that's it for this item. We move on to the next agenda item, and that is fast charger incentive scheme and the new round for cleaner production partnership program. We must allow time for the government representatives to come in, because for this item, we have the Undersecretary for Environment and Ecology attending. Now, we have Ms. Diane Wong, Undersecretary for Environment and Ecology, Mr. Alan Low, Deputy Secretary for Environment and Ecology, Mr. Leung Wai-man, Principal Environmental Protection Officer from the ENEB, Mr. Raymond Wu, Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, Mr. Fong Kim-hwa, Assistant Director, and Dr. Benny So, Principal Environmental Protection Officer. Administration. Undersecretary, can you please walk us through the paper? Thank you, Chair. Now we would like to brief members on the fast charger incentive scheme and the new round of cleaner production partnership program. Of course, we want to have your support. In 2010, we announced the Hong Kong roadmap on popularization of electric vehicles in 2021, and then in 2024, we announced the green transformation roadmap of public buses and taxis. Our objective is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. Now, with strong support from the government, we have seen a significant increase in the number of electric vehicles. The increase is from 14,000 in 2019 to about 110,000 in end 2024. We must greatly increase the number of fast chargers, FCs, so as to meet the demand for charging. Now, we have got 10,400 public chargers provided by public and private sectors, but only about 1,700 of them are quick or fast chargers. Now, we cannot just rely on the government in the provision of FCs. In 2024 policy address, the CE said that $300 million would be put into the scheme to provide incentives for private sectors to retrofit fast charging facilities. And then by 2030, we should have an additional 3,000 extra FCs. So we should fully capitalize on market forces to increase the number of FCs and to enhance the equality of the environment. Then in 2028, the APD launched the Cleaner Partner Production Scheme together with the Department of Industry and Information Technology of Guangdong Province to assist Hong Kong-owned factories in Hong Kong and Guangdong Province to adopt cleaner production technologies so as to reduce emissions of pollutants. The program has been very successful. It was launched in 2008, and as at end last year, 4,200 projects have been approved, and we have reduced a total reduction of air pollutant emissions by about 41,000 tons, carbon dioxide emissions by 1.77 million tons, effluent discharge by 19 million tons, and saving of energy by about 18,000 terajoules. And
in order to tie in with our country's development in deepening the reform of ecological civilization system, the Chief Executive proposes to inject $100 million to launch a new round of the program to support Hong Kong-owned factories in adopting new cleaner production technologies in order to speed up the upgrade of traditional industries and operation practices with a view to achieving energy saving, emission reduction, as well as reduction in consumption and carbon emissions. The goal is to improve the environment in the region. We have conducted trade consultation. We'd like to solicit support of members so that in the middle of this year we can start the application. Now I'll give the floor to my colleagues to brief members on the specifics of the two schemes. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I will talk about the fast charger incentive scheme. The government will earmark $300 million for a new scheme to encourage the private sector to install fast charging facilities. There will be 3,000 more fast chargers by 2030 that will cater for the demand of EVs in the future. This will also provide convenience for EV drivers, and we will also be able to encourage more people to switch to driving EVs. We will only keep necessary checks, and we will also streamline procedures in order to reduce administrative costs and implement the scheme as soon as possible. We start applications in the second quarter of 2025. Each fast charger is capped at $100,000, and per organization the cap is $20 million. The organization will have to provide at least 5 fast chargers within 2 years and have experience of providing at least 20 fast chargers outside Hong Kong within 2 years. Eligible installation locations have to be parking or charging spaces that can be visited and used by the public for at least 12 hours daily, such as shopping malls, industrial or commercial buildings, and STT sites. The organization will have to pledge and declare that the subsidized fast chargers must be newly installed and that they must be put into operation as soon as possible and must start operation within 12 months upon receipt of an acknowledgement notice, otherwise the subsidy will be forfeited. The subsidized fast chargers do not receive any subsidy or grants from other government bureaus or departments. The organization will also have to provide information in a real-time manner in relation to charging and availability. Applicants are encouraged to penalize users who occupy a charging space after completion of a charging session. Organizations will also have to purchase insurance on public liability and fast chargers. Organizations will have to provide a compliance report certified by a registered professional engineer registered in the electrical or building services discipline. The content of the report shall include a work completion certificate, specifications of the fast chargers, and confirmation that they have been installed, tested, and commissioned, location maps and photos of fast chargers before and after installation, as well as insurance documents. We plan to disburse 50% of the subsidy within 6 to 8 weeks after the subsidized organization has fulfilled all the requirements. The approved commitment for the proposed non-recurring expenditure item is $300 million, with the actual cash flow subject to the number of applications and a timeline for completion of fast chargers. That is the end of my introduction of this scheme, and I will give the floor to my colleague in relation to another program. Thank you. I'll brief members on the new round of Cleaner Production Partnership Program. First of all, on the background of the program, it was started in 2008 and there have been 4 phases. We aim to reduce emissions of pollutants in order to improve the quality of the environment in the region. After these 4 rounds, a total of 4,200 projects have been approved. They helped reduce energy consumption and reduce air pollutants within the district, as well as the discharge of water. We aligned with our country's goal to expedite our transformation and move towards green transformation. We encourage using new technologies to try out new technologies in order to upgrade their traditional industries and achieve green transformation. In a new round of the program, we want to focus on using new cleaner production technologies. We provide subsidies in order to encourage factories to change their existing practices. In the new round of the program, we also encourage companies to use technologies developed by Hong Kong or local universities. We provide a platform to help these organizations or post-secondary educational institutions to help them enter the mainland market. I'd like to talk about the contents of the new round of the program. The factories and the government will contribute 50% of the project cost each. The funding ceiling is kept at $650,000, whereas the funding support will increase to $750,000 if the technology adopted is developed by Hong Kong or jointly by Hong Kong and Guangdong. We focus on 4 main areas: 1. Air pollutant emissions reduction technology, 2. Energy saving technology, 3. Effluent reduction and control technology, and 4. Solid waste reduction technology. We invited the Hong Kong Productivity Council as the implementation agent for the program. The implementation has been smooth and satisfactory. In view of the required professional knowledge, we recommend that the implementation agent for the next round of the program will still be the Hong Kong PC. It will be responsible for receiving and vetting applications, monitoring progress of approved projects, drawing up annual implementation plan, as well as planning and organizing promotion and publicity activities. There will also be a project management committee chaired by the Secretary for Environment and Ecology. Relevant bureaus and departments will also join this committee. Every year, we submit a progress report to the Panel on Environmental Affairs. We hope to solicit support of members, and subject to funding through the budget, we will start receiving applications starting from the second quarter of 2025, and we expect to receive applications until the 30th of June 2027. I'd like to talk about some examples. First of all, on air pollutant emissions reduction technology. In some factories, there will be volatile organic compounds emitted in printed circuit board factory, which pollute the environment. There is a mix of technologies, and in this case, there is an exhaust treatment system with zeolite rotor concentrator and catalytic oxidation technologies. This will lead to a reduction in the amount of volatile organic compounds emitted. In relation to energy-saving technologies, in metal products factories, in the production process, heating is involved. When energy-efficient infrared heating systems are involved, the temperature during the heating process can be accurately managed, so adjustments can be made. And the energy consumption can be effectively reduced in the heating process. I'd like to move on to the effluent reduction and control technology. For new arrangements, we work at the source. In this example, it is a metal product factory. It uses a low-temperature evaporator and handles the effluent at source. In the end, we successfully reduced the amount of effluent in this case. Before I open the floor for questions, if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to the item being discussed in accordance with Rule 83A, please disclose the relevant nature of the interest before you speak. This item is in relation to a funding proposal. Please also refer to paragraph 84A in relation to voting arrangements in the event of direct pecuniary interest. We have Dr. Loy Kwok, Mr. Luk Chung Hong, Mr. Chen Siu Hong, Mr. Tong Li Tse, and Ms. Carmen Kan having pressed the request to speak button. Dr. Loy Kwok, please, 4 minutes, questions and answers included. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to talk about the fast charger incentive scheme. I support it. For commercial for commercial car parks, if they provide fast chargers, these are great commercial opportunities. And I believe this will be well supported by the industry as well, if the government can provide subsidies. For EV owners, oftentimes the difficulties they run into is not the lack of public chargers, but there's a lack of charging facilities in the vicinity of their residence. In their housing estates, they reported difficulty in installing fast chargers. I've been in talks with power companies. They are actually willing to install chargers, but the housing estates say the OCs cannot reach a consensus, or owners don't have the need, so they don't want to spend an amount of money on installing fast chargers. My focus is how to give a hand to housing estates so we can further popularize the use of EVs. The other topic which I support is the Cleaner Production Partnership Program. Before I became a legislator, while I was still managing enterprises, I was involved in this program as well. Long before these programs, the Hong Kong Productivity Council helped the industry a lot. It helped from the perspective of environmental protection. I asked them to help with the handling of effluent in relation to the Cleaner Production Partnership Program. My experience with the program has been very positive. I support it. Thank you.
Under Secretary. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Low. In fact, we have done a lot to help EV owners to charge their vehicles at work or at home or in places where they frequent. Now we have exempted area for floor area. So if charges are provided for vehicles in a particular development, there can be exempted floor space, and we have already spent $3.5 billion on that. In 2023 December, there were over 700 applications when the scheme first started. Of course, there must be the consent of owners in corporation, and they must ask contractors to help. The progress is good. In 2024, 188 housing developments with 33,000 parking spaces fitted with chargers already. By 2027, we believe that there will be 140,000 parking spaces with the installation completed. Will provide the necessary assistance to help them. Thank you. Mr. Luk Chung Hong, thank you. I need to declare interest. I'm also an EV owner. If you ask whether I will support the scheme or not, I have to find out the details first, because the public are very concerned about the use of public money, although $300 million is not really a very big sum. Now, first, I must commend the government for having KPIs for installation of FCs. Now, we used to say that slow chargers were only there for window dressing. They were useless. Now we will have another 3,000 FCs. This is real progress. But people are asking, if this is viable business, why should the government subsidize the private sector? Now this is a vital question. Last year, I did a questionnaire survey on charging services. Many users were of the view that current FCs were very expensive and the fees were not transparent. This is particularly so for those who charge by the hour or minute, or because for those charging hourly rates, this is not fair. And even if they have minutely rate, the supply is not really, the power is not stable. So the fee structure is not transparent. And sometimes the operators raise fees if demand is high. Now the government is subsidizing the private sector for running a viable business. If the purpose is to encourage the use of EVs, that is okay. Now, if that's the case, the government should control or regulate the fee structure. The government promised to consider that, but there is nothing here. Perhaps the government should consider putting a cap on fee for FCs. or at least you should have a mechanism to ensure that the fee structure is reasonable and transparent. Thank you very much for your questions. Now, I will first answer the simple question first. We have regular meetings with members, and that is the question of charging on an time basis, on a quantity basis. Now, charging on the quantity basis, on a quantity basis already the mainstream. And the second question is, we are providing $100,000 in subsidy. This is just a small proportion of the capital cost, because the capital cost for installing an FC is $320,000. So we're only subsidizing 1/3 of the installation cost. You have to bear in mind that they have to make arrangements on their own for land, power supply, and installation, and bear the relevant costs. So the contractor itself is footing the majority of the bill. Our intention is to expedite the provision of FCs. We want to encourage the provision of more FCs in order to meet the demand. Mr. Lok said that it's a commercial operation, and therefore we require fee information for the EPD to disclose to users through EDP's website. And of course, the other points made by Mr. Loker will be considered when we work out the details of the scheme. Thank you. Ms. Chen Xiuhong, let me declare interest. I'm a senior advisor to CLP. Now, I support the fast charger incentive scheme because we all know that if we rely on general charges or medium speed charges, they are hardly sufficient to satisfy the demand of EV users. And as for the question asked by Mr. Lok Chung Hong, I think it is a chicken and egg problem. An FCE will cost over $300,000. The subsidy here is just an incentive, so I support the scheme in principle. The paper said that by 2030, the target is to have another 3,000 FCs. Now, we're not just concerned about the quantity, we are concerned about the quality as well. All right, we may have another 3,000 extra FCs, but how would they be distributed geographically? According to the PowerPoint, there are some constraints, and hopefully they will be installed in places with high pedestrian flow. But then at the end of the day, we have to see where these FCs are. If they are concentrated in high pedestrian areas, then maybe in remote areas will be short of FCs. So I'd like to know the administration's view. Do you have any idea as to the distribution of these new FCs in the whole territory? Will we be able to cover the NT, Hong Kong, and also Kowloon? In your paper, you said that you will disperse 50% of the subsidy within 6 to 8 weeks after the subsidized organization has fulfilled all the requirements. Why do you have to wait for more than a month? If they fulfilled all the requirements, then the funds should be dispersed within a couple of weeks. Why do they have to wait until close to 2 months? And then after half a year, they can only get the remaining 50%. Would that be too long a wait? The last question is about the second round, or new round of Cleaner Production Partnership Program for Hong Kong-owned factories. In para 17 of Annex 2, you have told us, rather in para 17, you told us about some of the results. Now, apart from the amount of carbon dioxide emissions or pollutant emissions, etc., reduced. Can you give us a list or some of the economic benefits brought about by the use of technologies developed in Hong Kong? First, the distribution of new FCs. This is very much based on market forces. Contractors will install the new FCs based on market demands. Many organizations are eligible to apply. They can be car parks, etc. They can install new FCs based on their needs and market demand. Some landowners have also approached us. The Development Bureau and the Logistics Bureau have also discussed with them to see how they can help. So even in the NT, there are establishments that are interested. As for the disbursement of subsidy, we have discussed with the sector. Now we will disperse the subsidy, half of the subsidy, within 6 to 8 weeks after all the requirements are fulfilled, and also 6 months after the FCs have been in operation for 6 months. We have taken into account views of the sector. Para 17 sets out some of the results in improvement to the environment. There are enterprises who have adopted these technologies after they have been successfully tried out in the program. Well, come next stage, we will also collect data in this area. And we'll see how we can disclose this information where appropriate. Thank you. Mr. Tong Lize. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to follow up on the fast charger incentive scheme. Your plan is to provide another 3,000 FCs by 2030. Do you know the estimated number of EVs by then? Are you happy with this rate, or do you have other ideas? The second question is to start to operate and maintain the service of the subsidized FCs for at least 2 years. Why 2 years? Or will you have any regulation on the fees? Why just 2 years? Why don't you make it longer? It's true that they have to provide for the installation cost as well, even though you have given them a subsidy. But why don't you make it longer? 6 months after the FCs have been in operation, all the subsidy will have been dispersed. Do you have any way to further regulate their service? Before the Undersecretary responds, let me say that the meeting will be extended by 15 minutes. Now, we will disperse half of the subsidy within 6 to 8 weeks after the subsidized organization has fulfilled all the requirements, and then the remaining subsidy after the FCs have been in operation for 6 months. And why? We say that the service has to be maintained for at least 2 years. I will defer to my colleague later. But first, I will talk about the number of EVs. Commercial vehicles, usually such as buses, usually charge at their own depot. But over 9% of our EVs are private vehicles. We expect that by 2027, we'll have about 194,000 odd private EVs, and the number will continue to grow. We already have FCs, quick and fast chargers. Of course, we have a number of assumptions at work. Assuming that it takes half an hour to fully charge an EV with an FC, subject to some variation depending on the make of the car, and then it can run for about 90 kilometers. So if it takes half an hour, then 3 hours will provide 6 sessions, and after 9 days, a vehicle will have to be recharged. Can you please allow me to interrupt? I'd like to know the ratio, please.
In the paper, we said we can support 160,000 vehicles. As I mentioned, we have fast chargers. Well, I mean, we have quick chargers. So we can cater for different demands. 163,000, yes, indeed. I'll give the floor to my colleague to supplement. Mr. Leung. Thank you. Just now we talked about the payment arrangements as well as the time. We have been in talks with the trade. 6 months, we want to give them cash flow. Some of them reported cash flow issues, so we allow 6 months. Well, I mean, after the payment or after disbursement of these subsidies, how are you going to follow up on it? Well, we'll conduct surprise checks. If we find any non-compliance, we will ask them to give us back the subsidies. We use 2 years as the requirement, having regard to the circumstances. We only pay a small amount, and they'll have to contribute a lot more in order to ensure sustainability of their services. We don't want to make the requirements too stringent for them. Well, 2 years, will it be a waste? We are providing subsidies of $100,000, but the program only runs for 2 years. Will it be too short? We are paying a lot to support the operation. There will be a shortfall of 3,000 chargers, so where will they be provided? Members concerned when we have spent money on it, but the program only lasts for 2 years. Say for 3,000 chargers, they're only going to be used for 2 years. The situation is not ideal. Probably you will have to follow up on it after the meeting. You will have to seek funding approval. So probably you may discuss it with members. You need to enhance communication with legislators. Ms. Carmen Khan. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to seek clarifications. Are these fast chargers public chargers? Are they in public places for public use? Just now, the Undersecretary mentioned for EV charging at home subsidy scheme by 2027, there will be a total of 200,000 chargers. By 2030, there will be 3,000 more fast chargers. Are they going to be used in public places? And how did you arrive at this figure? Members of the public may think that there will be that chargers will be used by the public, hence government subventions. Are they provided to the taxi trade? So, are your potential applicants CHA or the AA? You mentioned the ceiling is $20 million. For the first year, 200 FCs. That translates into $20 million. You need to take into account fairness. Quite many reflected to us that they have concerns about fast charging payments. Do you have any plans to manage payments? Are the pricing arrangements completely marketized? You require the organizations to identify land by themselves. Are power companies potential applicants? You need to make sure there is a level playing field for power companies and other applicants. Are the considerations the same? I believe the Bureau has to be a gatekeeper. You need to provide more information in the papers. Well, I wasn't referring to power companies actually. For private organizations to install chargers, we have requirements indeed. They need to allow the public to use for 12 hours daily. They also need to provide information about prices, locations in a real-time manner. They need to provide such information to the EPD. We want to be fast. This is our target. So when the program accepts applications, I believe there will be applications streaming in. Then subsidies will be granted on a first-come, first-served basis. For individual operators, we have already set a cap. Well, the administration hasn't answered all of my questions. So you're opening the applications to all private companies. Well, I believe you will have to continue to listen to members. As Mr. Lok mentioned, you need to strike a balance in relation to pricing and how to avoid conflicts of interest. I'll give the floor to my colleague in relation to pricing or charging. Thank you. As the Undersecretary said, we need to ensure fairness and openness. Organizations need to provide information about pricing and availability of FCs to the EPD. We want to be fast. We don't want to impose restrictions. After all, this is a business. Well, Chairman, I have a reservation. After all, you are providing subsidies amounting to $100,000, so you need to provide guidelines for companies to comply with. Charging based on the amount, this is, I believe, the trend right now. Well, just now the Undersecretary mentioned power companies which have subsidiaries. You may have to pay attention to this. Power companies not only provide electricity, they have other work as well. Next, Mr. Kwok Wai Kang. Thank you, Chairman. I have a few concerns, which are similar to Mr. Locke's. This program is similar to the newborn baby bonus, amounting to $20,000. The logic is the same. A couple won't want to give birth to a baby just because of the availability of the newborn baby bonus. There are only two possibilities with the program. When the organization doesn't find it lucrative or profitable, then the organization won't join the scheme. It will only join the scheme when it thinks that this is a profitable business. It may spark discussions in society that the government is helping organizations to make money. In the information papers, it mentions speeding up the progress. But in the papers, there will only be 3,000 fast chargers in 2030. We are only in the first month of 2025. If the contractors think that this is profitable, then they will join the program as well. Are public funds used well? We don't have a lot in the public coffers. We need to save as much as possible. Have the bureaus taken into account the financial status and considered all the factors? In relation to supervision within 2 years, how are you going to supervise the provision of the fast chargers? Because you will provide all the subsidies within 6 months. When an organization says that no one uses the fast chargers because it is not accessible or it is off the beaten track, so the fast charger may be used by only the organization. It is not open to the public, so to speak. When one needs to provide public facilities on a private piece of land, when the public use facilities, when the public cannot use certain facilities, there is a complaint mechanism. As members mentioned, we would conduct surprise checks. We want to make sure fast chargers are available for public use. In relation to the requirement of 12 hours for public use, we are glad to hear from members in relation to enhancement measures. Second round, Mr. Lok Chung Hong. I'll have to extend the meeting by an extra 15 minutes if members agree. If members agree, Mr. Lok, 3 minutes, please. Chairman, I do want to support this fast charger incentive scheme. I'm a user as well. But the details aren't well thought out by the administration. Capable government, effective market, we often say this. The government needs to provide guidelines to the market or guidance to the market. Each contractor can apply for a total of 200 fast chargers amounting to $20 million. Well, if one company divides itself into 15 companies, then the entire company can get the entire amount of the subsidies available. Why is the administration subsidizing companies to make profits instead of promoting the popular use of EVs? When shopping centers have fast chargers, then there will be more footfall in the shopping mall. this is a source of patrons as well. It is actually reasonable to impose reasonable restrictions. I'm not asking you to put in place very strict restrictions. You do need to consider whether there will be any person cornering the market. Someone may charge very high per kilowatt hour of electricity. You cannot assume all pricing arrangements of applicants are reasonable. I hope the administration will think it through. Thank you.
And the response from the Undersecretary, we will note Mr. Locke's views and we will provide a written response later. Okay? Chair. Well, the reply is too short. I think Mr. Kwok made a very good point. Even if you don't have this scheme, there are already people installing FCs in the market charging a very reasonable fee, some maybe at $3 per kHW. Now, with your subsidy, you haven't really expedited the provision of FCs, and there is also no regulation over the fees. Can it be that even after your subsidy, you are not going to make any change in the market, and people also criticize you given our fiscal difficulties? I just visited technology R&D center. You can consider how you can use R&D to lower the installation fee cost. You should not just provide money for the sector without any regulation over their operation. This is not the right way to do. Any supplement from the administration, please? Yes, we heard Mr. Locke's views. I just like to provide some background for members' consideration. Of course, we will think about Mr. Locke's views very carefully. First, charging facilities is very different from conventional supply of fuel. The threshold for market entry is low, so we believe competition will make the fees reasonable. Secondly, since it is a commercial operation, why should taxpayers or why should we subsidize the installation with public money? As mentioned by the Undersecretary, the purpose is to expedite the provision of FCs to give a push to the private sector to enhance the FC network. You can call it a subsidy or incentive. In fact, it is minor compared with the total cost. If you look at the land cost as well as the installation cost, we are only subsidizing less than one-third of the total installation cost. If you take into account other costs, so we are only subsidizing less than 10%. Some members asked if there is some commercial incentive, people will install FCs with or without a scheme. Let me give you some information. For retrofitting FCs at petrol filling stations, the current incentive we provide is some incentives in the lease extension or renewal. Response from current operators is such that they will retrofit FCs in some stations and not in other stations. That means without our subsidy, the process of adding FCs to current PFSS will be slower. We understand that we should be very prudent in spending public money. But then using public money can indeed expedite the expansion of FC network. I hope members can note this point. But I said we will consider very carefully the views expressed by members, and outside the meeting we're willing to further communicate and exchange views with members. Now, for the granting of land to operators for FCs for taxis, you do have a price cap. Why not for the current scheme? All right. In general, members are supportive of the scheme, but then there are views that the government should extend the the service period after giving the subsidy. And some ask whether the current scheme can really help the popularization of EVs and whether you can really help the FC network. We understand that sometimes to expedite the expansion, you need to provide some subsidy, but I think members' concerns have a point, and you really have to adjust your scheme. So my question is whether members support the administration's proposal to include the scheme under the 2025-26 budget. If there is no objection, then hopefully before the budget, you can meet with members again to address our concerns, or at least give us a paper to address the concerns raised by members. For instance, if we say that the period of operation is just 2 years, is too short, then you can extend it to 3 years. Can we ask why it will be included into the draft estimates? Why aren't you asking the FC's approval? Well, I said we want to expedite the whole scheme. Hopefully, after the appropriation bill is enacted in the second quarter of the year, we can start to accept applications. That is our view. Well, I don't see any reason for the rush. The target is 2030. You are not meeting the target as quickly as Shenzhen. They achieve it in 1 or 2 years. Now, of course, if you include it in the appropriation bill, it's hard for me to oppose. Yes, $300 million is not a big sum. Why am I so adamant today? Because we have asked the users. Some say that if it is just double of the basic electric tariff, then it's acceptable. But for some operators, they are really profiteering. For some prime locations, they are charging very high. Is it really acceptable? All right, as suggested by the chair, after this meeting, we can meet with members. We can perhaps discuss with them the points of concern before we give a reply. Mr. Kwun, I understand that the Bureau has its technical considerations, but I hope they can understand the concerns of the community. We have a fiscal deficit of over $100 billion, and every dollar counts. We are worried about possible controversies. So I hope you can shorten the target time so that we feel that the money spent can really expedite the expansion of the network. We don't have to wait for 5 years, and people want to understand how you have expedited the provision of FCs. Now, please give us a written response, because you see there are still concerns from members, and do keep in touch with members here. Thank you. AOB, if there is no AOB, then meeting is adjourned. Thank you.